here I am. So what we know so far that endoscopic spine surgery are definitely on the rise. We are seeing that there are so many of presentation from the endoscopic spine surgeons. We already had the fight. In endoscopic spine surgery, we have different modalities: transforaminal, interlaminar, and as well as now UB is on the rise. The incision is definitely smaller compared to the tube. And intuitively, it feels better that, okay, smaller incision probably will lead to lesser blood loss, lesser muscle dissection, and that scope being inside will probably give you a better vision, so maybe will provide you the safety margin also. But at the same time, what we also expect that it should be able to do the same job. It should be non-inferior to the tubular surgeries. It should not happen that we are coming out with a lesser amount of decompression and the patient is coming up with a recurrence. And it should not have some additional newer short, set of complications which are difficult to deal. The setup cost, Dr. Nikhil has already spoken about. So I did my literature search and came up with few articles. Some of them were directly, case control studies, and some of them were meta-analysis. So because of lack of time, as I told you, like yesterday only I came to know that I'll have to give this PowerPoint presentation. So I put up all these articles on the notebook LM and ChatGPT and try to find out the unbiased view, because if I am reading, probably I'll be biased towards one or the other thing. So, and that's what I got, So how do endoscopic and tubular approaches compare in clinical outcome? So VAS for back pain was definitely lower looking at the endoscopic spine surgery, at least in the earlier post-op period. For rest of the other thing, whether it's the VAS for the leg pain or ODI in the long term or patient satisfaction, were more or less similar. Which technique has better surgical efficiency? Tubular surgery were definitely shorter, but hospital stay was little longer, and we'll see how long it is in the later part of the my talk. So what are the complication rates? So in some meta-analysis, they talked about 10% versus 15%. Endoscopic spine surgeries are definitely safer once mastered, but until that time, the learning curve is definitely steep. Complications, infections were zero, as Dr. Sumit just said, that solution to pollution is dilution. And in the endoscopic spine surgery, in one of the papers, they said there were no reoperation rate, but in tubular surgery, there were 4 reoperations. And which technique is preferred? As Dr. Abhay Kumar said here, that tubular surgeries are very versatile and can deal with almost all sort of issues, but endoscopic spine surgeries are reaching over there, but I think there is still time for them to kind of, prove their power for all kind of pathology. So in summary, the main thing which was where the tubular surgeries were winning was the operative time, which are definitely shorter in terms of, endoscopic spine surgeries requiring more time. And endotelif was, was little complex procedure requiring more time, specifically. So then I thought that I'll use another AI, Amit intelligence, rather than using the artificial intelligence. And I looked at these papers in depth, like what is the actual difference, how clinically relevant are the changes. Okay, blood loss is lesser, but how much lesser, and does it matter? So in one study, so blood loss was about 18 ml in the endoscopic group, which was 106 ml in the tubular group. So in terms of the clinical relevance, I mean, so, you'll have to kind of take it with a pinch of salt. In this particular meta-analysis, the complications rates were lower in the endoscopic group, which were 10.73% as compared to about 16% in the tubular group. However, after going into the depth of the paper, there was no mention which kind of complications they were talking about. Were they talking about the pain or the infections or the dural tears? So that information was missing from the paper. The one thing definitely this paper kind of discussed about, that the learning curve was smaller with the tubular surgeries. Like after doing 20 to 30 cases, you can become sufficiently efficient. However, even for the biportal endoscopy, which has come up with as a easier alternative to the full endoscopic surgery, even for those surgeries, you need around 90 cases to become efficient. Looking at the full endoscopic surgery in another paper, the blood loss was 10 ml versus 40 ml in the tubular surgery. So again, questionable. Hospital stay was very significantly shorter 0.011. But they didn't mention, like, like whether this 36 is hours, most likely it's hours, but it's, like you can see that it's 36 hours versus 46 hours, so about 10 hours difference. So if somebody is really finicky about statistics, then probably endoscopic spine surgery is winning over here. Success rates were 84% versus 79%, but in this paper they didn't talk about like what they consider as success rate. But this paper talked sensible thing, The magnitude of many of these differences were small and with uncertain clinical relevance. So take-home message is that endoscopic spine surgeries have better clinical outcome, or at least, like a comparative, with faster recovery and lesser hospital stay and lesser blood loss. But tubular surgeries are easier to learn, quicker to perform, and still highly effective. So it all depends on the surgeon's expertise, equipment availability, and patient's anatomy. Thank you. So with this, I would like to invite all the speakers from this session on the stage, please, so we can have a discussion. My first question is for Dr. Garg, Sahil. Yeah. So here, I'm still on the dais.
Yes, absolutely.
So this study is a pilot study,
Yes,
so
sir,
one thing which we were lacking here, like we are not using the promise criteria, outcome scores, but definitely, like the number of patients were, like significantly, like 5 in the endoscopic group. And so do we really think that it says anything,
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess I should have mentioned it a little bit more directly in my talk. So thank you for bringing it up. As you mentioned, we do still have very small sample sizes. And with these smaller sample sizes, the question of powering the study for statistical significance is definitely a question. So with regards to promise scores and preoperatively and postoperatively, some of the differences we see, is that going to be significant? It likely is not. However, I think we can still establish some general trends. So in the instance that both groups were able to improve to an approximate significant difference, that would give us insight to saying, hey, they're likely non-inferior. Where the study really shines, though, is in regards to examining the muscle dissection. I think the consistency that we see of 0 serum creatinine kinase being observed in the endoscopic arm is something we're going to continue to see. I mean, it's not even one.
Coming to that, how much clinically relevant that factor is, like serum creatinine kinase being 0, but like, is the patient kind of getting benefited by it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And that's part of the next step of this study, is to see essentially how much pain medication these patients are using at their 2-week follow-up. So what we have them do is record how much did they use and what modality did they use. And then we'll be able to compare those between groups to at least establish some trends. And then additionally, as we look at the VAS score at kind of 2 weeks, we'll see if there's any differences as well with regards to that.
So on the same line, Dr. Prithvi, you mentioned that multifidus is recovering faster. So, but is it getting reflected in terms of the patient's recovery?
Yeah, yes, sir. Even the clinical scores are better in UB group compared to the microdiscectomy group.
Okay.
Yeah, even the VAS score for back pain or the leg pain is significantly improved, and early recovery is.
Thank you. So, Dr. Abhay, I saw that you were doing some of these intradural surgeries. How easy is it to suture the dura through the tube?
Yeah, so we don't need to suture the, if it's a clean cut wound, we use Liga clips these days. These are, you can have the bayoneted.
So same kind of clip which you use for abdominal surgeries?
No, these are dural Liga clips are available.
Okay.
So those can be used and clean. If the clean edges are not clean as well, so you don't need to worry. Even if it's the video which I showed, the dura was totally shattered. So we can use a muzzle from there. It's a local muzzle, can be easily accessible. Put a muzzle patch over there. Even you can use a dural substitute, and Duracell or a T-seal can be used. The main fact is because we are not split the muzzle, not retract muzzle, the potential cavity is much less. So chances of pseudomeningocele and CSF are much, much less. Okay. So we can easily see.
Yes, Rakesh.
Yeah, so we do a lot of intradural tumors through MIS. Recently, we did our study, around 70 cases we completed. So what I use is 5-0-Prolin and use bayoneted needle holder and bayoneted forceps. Initially, it took a long time, but now is almost similar to open within time finish primary suturing of dura. The
And
same as
do you cover the dura with some patch or something?
So yeah, I do primary suturing and over which muscle patch and glue.
And Prasad, so in endoscopic spine surgery, if there's a dural tear, what would you do?
In my experience, whatever dural tear happened were in my early learning curve of probably first 20 cases, where I had 3 dural tear, which I definitely converted to open, because those dural tears were bigger. Whatever after that learning curve, whatever has happened, those were probably 2-3 mm of dural tear, and those definitely they don't need any kind of closure. But what I feel, whenever there is any kind of rootlet herniation, if it is there, I will always go and extend the incision. I'll go ahead and repair it. So
Repair means you'll be opening it a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, after that first few 20 cases, probably I never had that.
And your primary modality of endoscopic spine surgery is UB, transforaminal,
No,
or?
my primary nowadays, if I say overall, in my practice, open versus endoscopy, it is 70-80% of endoscopy.
No, in
20%.
endoscopic, which?
In endoscopy, it is more of a 70-80% again is interlaminar, and 30-40% is transforaminal.
Not UB.
No.
Yes.
I do have one question actually. I've been seeing some reports lately of conjoined nerve roots or nerve root anomalies sometimes that show up during endoscopic decompression. Have you ever run into those, or do you have any tips if you see that, what you do next?
Yeah. Probably, even we have published one of the case report also, even 2 case report, one interlaminar and one transforaminal. How you identify is you should always stick to the basic rule that whenever you are going for any interlaminar procedure, you start identifying the upper discal margin. Go to the upper discal margin first. Make sure that you see the lateral extent of the dura, then only start putting any of the instruments, because that is the step where if you are in a hurry to remove that herniation, even if it is coming out from a small area, and you start pulling it out. So that should not be the case. You should always go to the upper discal margin first, start removing the flavum till you come to the lower discal margin, and then middle of caudal pedicle. So we make sure that nerve root is visible from upper discal margin to lower discal margin and middle of caudal pedicle. Then only you start mobilizing the nerve root. Otherwise, there is a problem. And in that scenario, definitely, if there is any conjoined nerve root or any anomaly, you will definitely come across that.
Thank you very much.
Sumit, which is your preferred?
The audience also has got some questions.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Can I ask? No, first you can speak.
No. Waiting.
You know, regarding the conjoint nerve roots, complications are less than 1 actually percent. So let's not speak about that. What about the 99% benefit you have? So you are speaking about, like you showed about the blood loss and all that. Okay, so you are comparing about the blood loss and about the insignificant things. Now, let me compare, I'm sorry to say, I mean the tubular people, please don't mind it. In the tubular, to take out a disc, which is an interior structure, the posterior approach is used. You will remove the flavum, you will do the medial facetectomy, you will then a stressed out root, you will dissect the root, and then you reach the disc. I mean, such a big risk you are taking. Whereas in the foraminal approach, you end up straight away into the disc and take it out and go home, and the patient is happy. So how much normal structures you are removing? I mean, you're not talking about that. And that will do lot of fibrous tissue and, you know, that
But
kind
most
of thing.
of the surgeons
So
are
we
kind
don't
of...
talk about that. We talk about blood loss. Your was 15 ml, mine was 10 ml. What is this?
That's what.
So, but that's for the transforaminal you're saying. What about the interlaminar
So most of
approach?
the people are kind of, like shifting to interlaminar.
You know, I started this, by the way, I'm sorry to say that. This was... Huh? Okay. You know, this was, because people will see that this guy is bragging about himself. You know, this was way back, this was in 1998, that I went to I went to a guy who was doing the laser disc. So, what he used to do is that he was just putting a needle in the center of the disc and he was lasering it. 1998, I don't know where were you guys at that time. So 1998, so I came back, and in Delhi I started the laser discectomy. And I was lasering the disc in the central part, thinking that it will decompress an extruded disc. But an extruded disc which has come out of the annulus, it will never come down. So then I thought that what is the way, then I knew it that I'll have to hold it and take it out mechanically. By the way, I went to the,
Sir.
it was Orlando.
So relevant to the
Okay.
this thing, yeah.
So in Orlando, I found this matrix system there for the first time in the AOS. And I told that, I asked that guy, but he said, of course, we are just coming. It had not come in Delhi at that time. Then, I went. So so I'm a person who had seen the first tubular retractor and that. So that ultimately in 2001, we started with the foraminal and this tubular retractor. So this, I am there attached with this right from the day one. But these are the things which
Thank you, sir.
I just
Samit,
told you.
You had something?
I had one question for Dr. Pranay. Did you take into I think your topic was tubular versus endoscopic. Did you take into consideration, it was a single center, single surgeon study, and did you take the learning curve of the surgeon into consideration, or how it was?
For the endoscopic, sir, two different centers were there.
For
But
endoscopy,
yes,
only
sir.
for endoscopy, two different surgeons.
Yes, yes.
And for tubular,
Tubular, the same center.
one
Same,
surgeon.
One center. Yeah.
Okay.